The year is 1896. A new class photo is taken at Whitmore Academy. It is one of many routine documents destined for the archive. But this single photograph holds a secret that challenges the limits of historical evidence. The story begins decades later in the digital age. Jaden, working at the Crawford Historical Society, is tasked with digitizing the entire collection of school portraits from Whitmore Academy. The digitization project spans 3 decades of photographs, starting in 1896. Almost immediately, a disturbing pattern emerges in the collected images. In every single class photo, from 1896 to 1926, the face of one young student is present. This student is Kashton, and their story is one the historical record attempted to ignore. The first photo is the 1896 class. Kashton is visible among the youngest students. They look like a typical child of the era. The child wears simple clothing, common for the period. Their expression is neutral, their hands folded neatly. Nothing about the image suggests anything unusual at first glance. The team reviews the 1897 photograph, then 1898, and so on. In each, Kashton is in the class of their age group, but they do not appear to age. The facial features remain identical. The height stays the same. The body proportions show no development. By the 1905 photo, Kashton should be a teenager, ready to leave the academy. Instead, they are still a young child, now pictured among much younger students. The initial suspicion is that the archive has misfiled the images. Perhaps the dates are wrong. Perhaps the negatives were labeled incorrectly during storage. Jay, a historical photo analyst, confirms the integrity of the print dates and the original negative plates. The pictures are authentic, taken year after year. The student is present in all of them. Jay examines the paper stock, the chemical composition of the prints, and the wear patterns on the negatives. Everything confirms the chronological sequence. The photographs are real. The dates are accurate. Kashton appears in 30 consecutive annual photos without aging a single day. Jaden cross-references the student attendance registers of Whitmore Academy from 1896 to 1926. The name of Kashton does not appear in any enrollment record. This is a significant breach of policy for the rigorously documented era. Schools of that period kept meticulous records. Every student had an entry. Every family paid tuition. Every absence was noted. Yet, Kashton exists in 30 photographs but not in a single administrative document. One theory is that Kashton was a model or a paid performer used as a symbolic fixture by the school's administration, perhaps for external promotional photos. Schools sometimes hired children to appear in advertisements or recruitment materials. Perhaps Kashton was a professional child actor, brought in annually to create a sense of continuity in the school's visual history. Jay notes that the photos are candid, unposed classroom shots, not formal portraits. Kashton is often situated naturally within the group, not prominently displayed. In the 1898 photo, Kashton sits in the third row, partially obscured by another student. In 1902, Kashton stands at the far left, almost out of frame. In 1911, Kashton is in the center, but blends into the crowd. These are not the positions of a hired model. These are the positions of a real student, captured in the moment. Carson, a building historian, is brought in to examine the school building blueprints. The backdrop of the photographs is identical across all 30 years. The same classroom, the same light. The wooden panels on the wall show the same grain pattern. The window placement remains unchanged. The desk arrangement varies slightly from year to year, but the room itself is constant. Carson identifies the location as the East Wing classroom on the second floor, a space that remained in continuous use throughout the entire period. Why would a student with no record be photographed for 30 years in the same classroom without aging, simply to illustrate the passing of time? The answer lies in the school's desperate need for financial stability. Documents from the Board of Trustees reveal a major push for funding around the turn of the century. They focused on the Excellence in Classical Education initiative. The photo anomaly starts to look less like a ghost and more like a carefully crafted piece of propaganda. The school principal, Mario Elora, who was in charge from 1890 to 1930, was a known traditionalist obsessed with maintaining the Academy's reputation for continuity and stability. Mario Elora believed that the school's strength came from its unwavering commitment to traditional values. In letters to the board, Mario Elora wrote about the importance of visual consistency in marketing materials. The principal understood that wealthy donors wanted to see permanence, not change. Jay demonstrates that composite photography and manual retouching were common in the late 1800s. Photographers could combine multiple negatives to create a single image. They could paint over photographs to alter details. The technology existed to create elaborate deceptions. However, the recurring child is too perfectly integrated to be a simple paste-up. They are a real child, photographed multiple times. The lighting on Kashton's face matches the lighting in each classroom. The shadows fall correctly. The focus is consistent with the other students. The child's lack of aging suggests the photographs themselves are not taken 30 years apart, yet the surrounding class and teacher change every year. The clothing styles and building modifications confirm the 30-year span. In 1896, the students wear high collars and long skirts. By 1920, the hemlines have risen and the styles have modernized. The teachers age visibly. The furniture shows wear, new desks appear, old ones disappear. Everything changes except Kashton. This is the fundamental impossibility at the heart of the mystery. The team shifts focus from the child to the archive itself. The Crawford Historical Society documents a practice where the Academy kept a set of control photos for internal review. These were reference images, used by the school administration to track changes in the building and curriculum over time. They were never meant for public distribution. The only clue is a diary entry from a former school janitor, Finley, dated 1927. It mentions a special photographic project for Mario Elora and a weekly photographic session with the small one. Finley writes about setting up equipment in a room near the main classroom. The entry is brief but revealing. It describes a routine that took place every Thursday afternoon for years. Carson finds evidence of a small hidden room, the archive chamber, adjacent to the main classroom. This room was built into the school's structure in 1895. It was a dedicated, controlled photographic studio. The blueprints show a space approximately 8 feet by 10 feet with a single window facing north. North light was preferred by photographers of the era because it was consistent and diffuse. The room had no other purpose in the school's official records. Kashton was not a student, but the child of the school's caretaker, raised on the property. They were photographed weekly in the same chair, with the same lighting, in the same corner of the room. The caretaker, whose name appears in employment records as Maya, lived in quarters on the school grounds. Maya had been employed by the Academy since 1894. Census records from 1900 list a child in the household, age 7, matching Kashton's appearance in the photographs. The final class photos were composites. The small child's weekly picture was digitally composited by hand retouching onto the annual class picture for 30 years to demonstrate the school's unwavering spirit and eternal youth to wealthy donors. The unchanging child was a visual metaphor for the permanence of the institution. This was the institutional need for stability at work. The school was selling an image of timelessness. In an era of rapid social change, donors wanted to invest in something that would endure forever. The technique was sophisticated for its time. The photographer would create the annual class photo as usual. Then, in the dark room, they would carefully expose the negative again, this time with a masked area where Kashton would appear. A separate negative of Kashton, taken that same week in the archive chamber, would be exposed into that space. The result was a seamless composite that appeared to show Kashton as a member of each year's class. Kashton was used as a living prop. Their identity was subsumed by the school's need for a striking yet non-aging image. The child never attended classes. They never had classmates. They never graduated. Their entire relationship with the school was defined by those weekly photographic sessions. Kashton grew up in the shadows of the academy, used as a visual tool but denied any real participation in the institution they represented. The investigation reveals more troubling details. Dream, a local historian specializing in labor practices, uncovers employment contracts from the period. Maya's contract included a clause requiring the child's availability for special projects as directed by the principal. The compensation for this work was minimal, barely more than standard janitorial wages. The family had little choice but to comply. Refusing would have meant losing their housing and income. Viviana, a photography historian, examines the technical evolution of the composites over the 30-year period. The early images from 1896 to 1905 show expert craftsmanship. The blending is nearly perfect. By 1910, the quality begins to decline slightly. Small inconsistencies appear. In the 1918 photo, Kashton's shadow falls at a different angle than the other students. In 1923, the edge of the composite is visible as a faint line. The photographer was aging, or perhaps growing careless. The deception was becoming harder to maintain. Elaine, an archivist specializing in institutional memory, discovers correspondence between Mario Laura and several wealthy benefactors. The letters explicitly reference the timeless quality of the academy as shown in the photographs. One donor writes in 1907 that seeing the same innocent face year after year gives him confidence that the school's values will never waver. Another writes in 1915 that the unchanging child proves the academy exists outside the chaos of the modern world. The deception worked exactly as intended. Elodie, a child welfare historian, places Kashton's story in the broader context of the era. Children of staff members were frequently exploited by institutions. They were not protected by labor laws. They had no advocates. Their parents were often too economically vulnerable to object. Kashton's case is unusual only in its documentation. Countless other children likely experienced similar exploitation without leaving any trace in the historical record. Layla, a genealogist, attempts to trace what happened to Kashton after the photo project ended. Census records from 1930 show Maya still employed at the academy, but no child is listed in the household. City directories from the 1930s and 1940s contain no entries for anyone matching Kashton's description. The trail goes cold. The child, who appeared in 30 annual photographs, disappears from history the moment they stopped being useful to the school. Sunny, a conservator working with the physical photographs, notices details that others missed. Under magnification, tiny scratches on the surface of the composites reveal the hand-retouching process. The photographer used a fine blade to scrape away emulsion, then applied new chemical to blend the edges. It was painstaking work. Each photograph took hours to complete. The level of effort invested in maintaining the deception is staggering. Briella, a specialist in historical fraud, compares the Whitmore Academy case to other known instances of photographic manipulation in the period. Composite photography was common, but usually for artistic or experimental purposes. Using it systematically to deceive donors over multiple decades is almost unprecedented. The closest parallel is a case from a Boston boarding school in 1910, where administrators created fake graduation photos to inflate enrollment numbers. That deception lasted only 3 years before being exposed. The Crawford Historical Society debates what to do with the findings. Airy, the society's director, argues for full public disclosure. The story is too important to suppress. It reveals how institutions manipulate truth for financial gain. It shows how vulnerable populations, especially children, are exploited. It demonstrates that even photographic evidence cannot always be trusted. The archive's most potent discovery is the truth about Kashton, a life sacrifice to a school's public relations campaign. Remy, a board member with ties to Whitmore Academy's current administration, urges caution. The school still operates today. It still relies on donations. Revealing this historical deception could damage the institution's reputation and hurt current students. The past should remain in the past. The team's work should focus on preservation, not scandal. Jaden makes the final decision. The findings will be published in full. The archive's mission is truth, not institutional protection. The team has uncovered a systematic erasure of a child's identity. That erasure cannot be allowed to continue. Mario Elora was ultimately successful in their campaign, securing massive endowments. The perpetual youth of Kashton became a whispered legend among the alumni for decades, confirming the school's eternal value. Donations poured in throughout Mario Elora's tenure. The school expanded. New buildings were constructed. The endowment grew to become one of the largest in the region. All of it built, at least in part, on the image of a child who never aged because they were never really there. The most damaging truth is that the school systematically erased the child's identity from all administrative records. The photos are a visual document of an erasure. Kashton exists in the archive but not in the institution's official memory. The school kept the image but discarded the person. It is a form of violence that photography made possible. The last image of the child is from 1926. They are still small, but the quality of the composite is rougher. The photograph shows signs of hasty work. The edges are less precise. The lighting is slightly off. Mario Elora retired in 1930. The photo project stopped with their retirement. The deception ended not because of conscience but because the person who orchestrated it left the institution. Why is this photo anomaly important now? It is not about a ghost. It is about the power of photography to create a fabricated reality. In 1896, photography was still relatively new. People trusted it as objective documentation. The camera does not lie, they believed. But the camera can be made to lie, and institutions learned to exploit that vulnerability. The Whitmore Academy photos are an early example of what would become a pervasive problem in the 20th century. The archive's most potent discovery is the truth about Kashton, a life sacrificed to a school's public relations campaign. The team's work is the final resolution. It uncovers the human story hidden behind a bureaucratic need. Jaden states the findings formally in the Society's official report. The child was identified through local census records and finally given a name. The fundamental impossibility is solved by separating the image from the reality. The image remained static to lie. The reality was a child growing up in the school's shadows. The story of the Whitmore Academy photos is a critical lesson for archivists and historians. Even in factual records, an agenda can obscure the truth. The mystery was never how the child could not age, but why the school needed to pretend they did not. The answer reveals the intersection of photography, power, and exploitation in ways that remain relevant today. The power of a photograph from 1896 continues to shape the understanding of the past. Every archived image carries the potential for both revelation and deception. The true mission of the archive is to bring the obscured human stories back into the light. Kashton's story, hidden for nearly a century, now stands as testimony to the lives erased by institutional ambition. The photographs that were meant to deceive have become evidence of that deception. The archive has fulfilled its purpose by refusing to let the erasure stand.